Prohibition Partners TV with Lynsey Hooper.
Hello, welcome back for another interview brought to you by Prohibition Partners. We're releasing a series of interviews for you to enjoy as we build up to our flagship event in June, Prohibition Partners Live. And today's interviewee will highlight one of the personal stories behind the use of medicinal cannabis and its benefits. I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by campaigner Vera Twomey.
Hi, Lynsey. How are you? Thanks for having us on.
Vera, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start off by your connection to the cannabis industry, if you can explain that for us.
Sure, Lynsey. I have a little girl. Her name is Eva Barry, and she's now, I'm glad to say, she's now 10 years old. She was diagnosed when she was 4 months old with a condition called Dravet syndrome, which is a chronic form of epilepsy, which resulted in her having multiple seizures every day. So at one point, Eva would have been having, she could have been having up to 20 of the tonic-clonic seizures in a day, which are the more dramatic form of seizure that, you might be familiar with seeing sometimes on the television, for example, when someone falls to the ground and their body shakes. So these obviously were extremely dangerous. And particularly because they were coming so frequently, we were spending long periods of time in hospital with her, and she was on multiple medications. As we went along, the seizures, they came in peaks and troughs, but what was continuous was that the pharmaceutical medications continued to fail Eva. So she would try each one of them as they went along. Often they weren't withdrawn. It was generally the case that more pharmaceutical medications were added to the list. And as each one continued to fail, as a family, we continued to try and find alternative information, research on her condition and so forth. And we began to see that over in Colorado, and actually, excuse me, this is kind of upsetting because this is the first time that I've done an interview where I've mentioned Charlotte Fickey, and Charlotte has now passed. But Charlotte was my personal inspiration along with her mother, because she had Dravet syndrome as well. She was suffering up to 300 seizures a day, and her mother went about getting medical cannabis to treat her seizures. And I saw the spectacular achievements that Charlotte was making, the reduction in seizures and so forth. And I wanted that for Eva. And I didn't know how I was going to get it, but I knew that I was going to try, and that was where our journey started. Now, Charlotte has passed away, so Lord mercy on her, she's gone, but her legacy remains now in families like ours, where we saw how another family went out and got this for their child.
You've written a book as well for Eva. What changes have you seen since that in Ireland?
Yes, well, I mean, Eva's journey was quite remarkable. What we had to go through to access medication for Eva involved so much publicity. It involved having to go out and tell Eva's story out in public, which I never thought I would ever have to do, like that I would never be forced to do. I had no understanding whatsoever of the opposition to accessing medical cannabis. I had no understanding of what that was going to be like whatsoever. I just knew that this was a possibility to stop Eva's seizures. And so therefore, so much happened in the course of 4 or 5 years between campaigning, between meeting politicians. I spoke over in the House of Commons in the the Parliament over in London. I was over in Europe in the Parliament, in the European Parliament, speaking there about medical cannabis. Extraordinary things. The reaction at home to Eva, to her situation, the support that we got from ordinary people. I had to write it down, and I wanted to leave something there for my children when they were older, that they could understand why mummy was always on the phone or why mummy was going to meetings, because that was really important to me, that they understood, because I have 3 other children alongside Eva, that they would understand why there was always so much to be done to get this medication. Now, we got Eva's medication finally between being detained in Dublin airport for bringing the medication back into the country after walking for several days up to Dublin, after being forced out of the country over to Holland for a 6-month period, which we were forced to do to access the medication for her. After all of that, we were granted an individual license. But it's over a year ago now, there was supposed to be a compassionate, the word compassionate is rather ironic. I find the compassionate access program. Now, as we sit here at the moment, to the best of my understanding, not a single person has been granted medical cannabis in the Republic of Ireland under the compassionate access program scheme. Not a single one. Right. Each of the individuals who have access to medical cannabis in Ireland have it under an individual license. And it is in a very, very narrow set of circumstances that one is allowed to access it. You've either got intractable drug-resistant epilepsy, which my daughter has in the form of Dravet syndrome, or it's in relation to spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis, or it is for the side effects of chemotherapy in relation to cancer treatment. So there are many, many other groups of patients in the Republic of Ireland who desire access to medical cannabis. For example, the chronic pain patients. And none of these people are facilitated under the compassionate access program. Anybody that has got a license gets it on an individual basis and must fit this narrow, tight criteria to get the license. But it doesn't stop there in Ireland. If you have a license for medical cannabis on an individual basis, you are forced to leave the country every 12 weeks, travel to Den Haag, to the Transvaal pharmacy, collect your medication there, pay for it yourself, and pay for your flights and possibly accommodation if you need to stay the night, and then come back with your medication. And then at the discretion of the Irish government, you are refunded your flights and refunded your medication. Now, not everybody is being refunded. Some are and some aren't. So it is a dreadful situation to be in. And I know this myself as the parent of a child like my daughter Eva. She's doing wonderfully well, you understand, but she is a person who needs 24-hour assistance.
And how has Ava been doing since you've been able to access medicinal cannabis?
I would say to you, Lynsey, that the difference in our lives and Ava's life is probably the difference between candlelight and electricity. It's just a different existence. My daughter, for example, would have had, as I said to you earlier, constant seizure activity. I mean, you're not just talking about, maybe between 5 and 20 tonic-clonic seizures a day. You're talking then on top of that of absent seizures, of myoclonic jerks, of all different shades of seizure activity, because there is so much and it is so varied. we would be transported to hospital in an ambulance probably every week to 10 days. And to kind of put it in perspective, we would probably have been spending in the first 78 years of Ava's life about 5 months of every year in hospital. Okay, so I mean, try to imagine what that is. That's January, February, March, April, May. 5 months.
Longer than lockdown, what we've been going through at the moment, for people to take that on board. It's been longer than what we've had since March. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And constant fear, the anxiety. You know, you could never even come close to even winding down, because you were on high alert at all times, because like that even another seizure would come. And then the cannabis came. Initially, we began Charlotte's Web it was the October of 16. We started Charlotte's Web, and the seizure stopped completely. Initially, for 13 days, Ava did not have a single solitary seizure, not one.
Wow.
Now, we didn't, because bear in mind, Ava was our first child. We only had 4 months of knowing Ava at the beginning of her life without seizures. I did not know what life was without seizure activity. I did not know what life was without that high level of alert that I was on all the time. I had become even unaware that I was on alert, if you know what I mean. Do you know what I'm saying? So they stopped, and then we were afraid to say that they had stopped, because we thought if we say it out loud, you know, they'll dramatically return. So after 13 days, she had another seizure, and what happened was, in the October, November, December of that year, her seizure activity was reduced down by overall, I'd say about 95%. Okay? So this was life-changing. We started to see our daughter smiling for the first time. Like, we started to see that there was life kind of coming into her eyes, that, you know, it was actually so remarkable that we were almost getting to know our child, because the pharmaceutical medication had dulled her. We even take joy in her giving out. And when I say giving out, I mean, do you know what giving out means? It's demanding to do something that you want to do, you know? Okay. So Ava's demanding now that she wants to go outside, and, you know, even though it's a bit chilly outside, she's going out, and that's it. She has the most extraordinary determination, and she's so stubborn, and she's just so amazingly determined that I'm so proud of her.
Given all the publicity that you've had around this, how has the Irish healthcare sector responded?
Okay, the overall response of the Irish healthcare sector has been mixed. Some of the healthcare professionals find it easier to ignore the fact that medical cannabis is something that is working for patients. I think that some of them, they don't understand medical cannabis. They maybe don't take it seriously enough yet to have done enough research about it. And on the other hand, then you cannot tar every professional with the same brush, because there are some other consultants out there that have looked into it and are interested. And I mean, for example, the consultants that are involved in Ava's care are still bemused by her success. I think that it's got a lot to do with the fact that cannabis is not talked about as a medicine within the medical community. medical cannabis or the endocannabinoid system is not taught to students in universities. So therefore, when you have new doctors coming out of university, they do not even have the basis of an understanding of what the endocannabinoid system is, or what medical cannabis does specifically, or how it works, or where it goes to improve the symptoms of people with, so many different conditions. So because that basic knowledge isn't there, I think that the medical professionals, whether they would like to admit it or not, are floundering because they're not getting the information from the places where they normally search for answers to their questions. And plus there is an absence of any there's an absence of any scheduled system of learning for them. If they were able to how they go for so many points every year to keep their learning updated. Well, if study on medical cannabis could be included in that system of learning, I think that would be a dramatic help to all the consultants and professionals. But is it as bad as what it was? No, it is not. Could it improve dramatically? Yes, it could.
I know, Vera, that you've had to overcome so many obstacles to get where you are, but for any other families who are watching this and wanting to take something away, what one thing would you recommend to them?
It's very simple. Never give up. Never give in. Never give up. You cannot allow yourself to be told that your child or your loved one has no future. You cannot allow yourself to be told that this is how it's going to be. No, do not accept it. I'm not talking about not accepting reality, but what I am talking about is not accepting reality as defined by somebody else's experience and what they have seen happen to other people in their role or in their situation. When we were diagnosed with Dravet syndrome, the consultant told us that Ava would never walk, never talk, that she would be in a wheelchair, and that we should seriously look into residential care for our daughter into the future. And I remember that. There's a lot of stuff that I don't remember about, what has happened, but I will never forget that. And
no, you wouldn't.
I will never forget the feeling that hit me so hard, even though she was so small, that I felt, how dare anybody decide what she's going to be without even trying, The story of what Ava has gone through, Ava's book is it's called For Ava, and it's available on amazon.co.uk. I mean, I would be so delighted, excuse me, if people were kind enough or good enough to go and get a copy of her book, either, in paperback or on Kindle, and to just leave what you call it, a comment, a review.
Or a review.
Because, I wrote the book myself, and it became a bestseller here in Ireland, and I'm just, I feel so strongly that we all have a part to play, and telling Ava's story could be something that would help another family, and realizing that, the stigma that is attached to cannabis is not in every set of circumstances justifiable. And like the book goes through about what life was like, the obstacles that we had to overcome, and just the joy that was to see her improve and to see her move forward. So that would be and I would be delighted if people would pick up the book and read it, leave a review and share their thoughts about it with other people, so that maybe we can all make a contribution to changing this negative attitude to cannabis. Because for us, we feel very strongly that if medical cannabis had been brought into Ava's life sooner, the seizures would have been eliminated, her quality of life would have been improved sooner. And just as an addition, I mentioned to you about the 5 months that she used to spend every year in hospital. After the initial introduction of CBD oil and subsequently THC oil into her medical regime, we were able to gradually remove all of the pharmaceutical medications that Ava was on, so that now her Dravet syndrome, one of the most catastrophic forms of epilepsy known to man, is being controlled solely by CBD and THC medication. And Ava has not been admitted to hospital in an emergency since October of 2016.
That's fantastic. That is
so
really good progress.
That's nearly 4 years. It's a real kind of visual of the of the need for change, of the absolute need for education surrounding medical cannabis, because it is life-changing stuff. Yeah.
Vera, thank you very much for your time. That's a truly inspirational story, and one that I think will touch so many people. Thank you very much. We will be back with more of these from Prohibition Partners. We'll speak to lots of people you can expect to hear from at Prohibition Partners Live in June on the 22nd and 23rd. Remember, you can register early for the early bird tickets. That's prohibitionpartners.live, and we'll see you next time.
Be part of the conversation at Prohibition Partners Live, 22nd to 23rd of June, the premium online cannabis industry conference.